Friends of Canadian Broadcasting podcast.
Hi, it's Ian Morrison. I'm talking to you from the Art Gallery of Calgary. We are organizing here today the launch of the Keep It Canadian campaign, a campaign to make sure the Government of Canada knows that Canadians care about Canadian control of broadcasting and communications. At our session today, Friends of Canadian Broadcasting joined hands with ACTRA, which is the Alliance of Canadian Television and Radio Artists, and the Communication, Energy and Paper Workers Union. We also made public the results of a Harris Decima public opinion poll, which demonstrate that by a very wide margin, Canadians agree with our point of view. The message from this event to the government is, keep it Canadian.
I'm here today to reiterate our support for maintaining the current restrictions on foreign ownership in telecommunications and in broadcasting, including cablecasting.
I thought I'd start with a little brief snapshot of the state of the Canadian broadcast industry today. We find that Canada's private networks, television networks, the primetime schedules of those networks are dominated by U.S. programs, and increasingly so. And I bring a little prop with me today to show you examples. Here's the primetime schedule for Global. It's not much different from the primetime schedule of CTV. The blue indicates U.S. programming, and the little bits of red are Canadian programming.
Presently, because of the concentration of ownership and because of the desires to feed shareholders, there has been, right across the country, a reduction in news gathering in this country. Recently, you might have read that CanWest Global has let go about 200 people in its broadcasting sector, and well over 100 people will be coming out of its newspaper operations. So what we have is less people on the ground, less people telling the important stories that a democracy feeds upon, so that people can make informed choices. Without information, we can't make choices, and without choices, we don't have democracy.
Right now, the CRTC is considering an application by CanWest Global to buy Alliance Atlantis Broadcasting, which has broadcasting and film assets and specialty channels, and that purchase is financed by a U.S. investment bank, Goldman Sachs. 64% of the investment in that takeover is through the New York investment bank, Goldman Sachs. So if this transaction is approved, then the U.S. bank will have control of Alliance Atlantis, in fact, and will have foreign ownership by the back door.
And if it's allowed, you can be sure others will follow.
The push for allowing foreign ownership of broadcasting comes mainly from four family-controlled cable monopolies: Videotron, Cogeco, Rogers, and right here in Calgary, Shaw.
The cable companies, and there's a whole list of media companies in this country that would like to sell out.
Why are they pushing so hard? Within Canada, there are not many potential buyers for their controlling positions. Opening up broadcasting to foreign control would vastly increase the number of potential bidders for their controlling shares. So we have a small, powerful, and well-connected group who stand to benefit, and a government sending mixed signals.
Now, if this hasn't really got you all excited, then maybe this will. We have a very serious concern of turning over our Canadian industry to American interests, particularly in light of the new legislation in the U.S. that requires U.S. companies by law to turn over all their records to the Homeland Security Agency south of the border.
If American investment took over our media companies, you can be sure that sooner or later, the unique and distinct Canadian voice, particularly in news and information, would start to disappear. There's no reason why if Fox News, for instance, started to team up with Global, that they wouldn't quickly be saying, you know what, why do we need a global foreign bureau and a Fox News foreign bureau? Why don't we just have one foreign bureau over in Iraq?
If the federal government weakens or eliminates the current foreign ownership limits, then foreign conglomerates like Viacom, like General Electric, will buy control of our broadcasters, pure and simple, and Canadians will have their television programming choices not decided in LA or New York.
The consequences to Canadians of turning over our telecommunications and media to foreign interests is significant and will have a negative impact to Canadian culture, policies, consumers, employment, and if that isn't enough, our civil liberties.
As you know, in the United States, there is not a public broadcaster similar to the CBC. And even as private broadcasters under Canadian ownership put a lot of pressure on the government to end the role of the CBC, you can be sure were these companies owned by Americans that they would put even greater pressure and the role of the CBC would be continually diminished. That is a huge threat to this country.
The way we do things in some areas of human endeavor is we have laws and we have regulations which restrict in some way and control in some way those things which attend upon the greater public interest. There are lots of things that we don't regulate. There are lots of things that we shouldn't regulate, but there are some things that require regulation. I believe, along with everybody else who has spoken here, that broadcasting is one of them because there is a public trust involved and there's certainly a public interest involved in broadcasting. If we haven't got the means of telling our stories to ourselves and to the world, then the whole concept behind that flag goes out the window.
Because the Broadcast Act balances this corporate desires and the corporate priorities to reward shareholders for their investment and the public priorities to serve the public interest in terms of news, information, and drama. And the Broadcast Act says quite specifically that broadcasting should be owned and controlled by Canadians.
That's why ACTRA, CEP, and Friends commissioned a public opinion survey, which by Harris Decima, on Canadians' views on Canadian control of media and communications, which we have released here in Calgary today. Here are just a few highlights. 82% of Canadians think it is important for the Canadian government to work to maintain and build a culture and identity distinct from the United States. 61% of Canadians are opposed to foreign control of telephone, cable, and media companies. 62% of Canadians are more likely to vote for a candidate who opposes foreign companies owning more Canadian broadcasting and telephone companies. Only 19% are more likely to vote for a candidate favoring foreign control. When politicians read a poll like this one, they are interested in the views of the Canadians who support them, and particularly those who might support them. There is a powerful message in this poll for Mr. Harper and his government. Conservative supporters, in common with other Canadians, strongly support Canadian control of media and communications. Even more important, those Canadians who say that voting Conservative would be their second choice feel even more strongly about keeping it Canadian than other voters.
You now have an important role to perhaps temper the government of Stephen Harper, demand that the government say, look, this is not on our agenda, this is not going to happen. We do believe our media and telecommunication system should be in the hands of Canadians, and let's get something that is clear from this government about where they stand on this issue.
It's desperately important that we let people who are running for office in federal government know that those regulations must not be changed. That this country, the same as every other country in the world, must protect the integrity of its indigenous broadcasters, private or public. That we must not allow control to be wrested from this country and put someplace else to have the effect, and it is inexorable that it will have those effects upon what we see and the stories that we see and the news that we hear and the slants on the news that we hear every day from our broadcasters, radio and television. So I urge you, please, whenever there is a next election and the one after that and the one after that and the one after that, go to those meetings and ask the candidates to tell you what their position is on the question of ownership of Canadian broadcasters, and let them know what your position is on the ownership of Canadian broadcasters. And it ought, in my view, to be that Canadian broadcasters ought in the main to be owned by Canadians. Thank you.
Thanks very much for watching. You can visit friends.ca to find out how you can stay involved. Have a good day.